She was deemed worthless, unmarriageable, unwanted, and her father made a decision that would shock Virginia. The sun hung low over the plantation. Shadows stretched long across the dusty ground. Her father's gaze was cold, hard, unyielding. "She cannot marry," he said, his voice cut through the air like a whip, "but she must be placed." Whispers ran through the servants' quarters, eyes darted nervously. They had heard of his choice before, but never had it involved his own daughter. He summoned the strongest slave on the plantation, a man whose reputation was carved in fear and respect. Men whispered he could lift a barrel with one arm. He had fought off men twice his size. He was untouchable. And now he was given her. Her heart pounded as she was led from the house. Her dress brushed the dirt, torn from rush and fear. She looked up at the slave, towering, broad-shouldered, unsmiling. He stared back at her, a storm in his eyes. Respect? Curiosity? Or a warning? She couldn't tell. The other slaves watched in silence. Some whispered prayers, some averted their eyes. No one dared speak. Her father's hand rested on her shoulder for a moment, an imprint of authority, and then it was gone. She was his to give, she was his to claim, and no one would stop him. The first night on the plantation was worse than she imagined. The house seemed colder, shadows longer. Every creak and sigh of the floorboards became a threat. The slave did not speak much. He moved with a quiet strength. Every glance, every gesture was calculated. She felt a mix of fear and curiosity. Could he be her savior or her curse? Time seemed to stretch. Every hour became unbearable. But escape was impossible. The plantation was a cage, and her father's words echoed in her mind. "You are given, not chosen." Outside, the wind carried distant laughter and the cries of the other slaves. Life went on, but for her, everything had changed in a single terrifying decision. She didn't know if she would survive the days ahead, but she knew one thing: her life would never be her own again. He was the strongest man on the plantation, but even he wasn't ready for what his master had just given him. The sun rose over Virginia, casting a golden light over the fields, but there was no warmth in the girl's heart. The slave stood in the yard, muscles tense, eyes sharp. He had lifted barrels heavier than a man, fought men larger than horses, and walked through storms without flinching. But this was different. She looked at him, fear and defiance tangled in her gaze. She had been given to him, but she refused to show submission. The slave approached slowly, every step measured, every movement deliberate. He did not speak. Words were useless here. Action would decide their fates. Her first instinct was to run, but the plantation was a cage. Escape was a dream, and he was a wall she could not pass. He reached out to steady her. She recoiled. His strength was undeniable, yet there was a restraint, a control in his grip that both terrified and confused her. Days passed. Silence filled the spaces between them. The girl learned to read his eyes. A glance could warn. A look could command. A shadow of a smile could almost comfort. The other slaves watched carefully. They had never seen him like this. He had always been untouchable, but now he moved differently, slower, cautious, calculating. The girl began to see cracks in his armor, moments of hesitation, glimpses of a man who bore his own chains of loyalty and fear. But trust was impossible, and love, that was unthinkable. Not yet, perhaps never. The first night alone in the quarters together was the hardest. Silence pressed down on them. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind became a test of courage. She could feel his gaze on her, steady, unwavering, and though she would never admit it, A small spark of curiosity ignited inside her. Could a man so strong be her only hope, or was he the beginning of a nightmare she could not escape? If you're hooked by their tension, don't miss what happens next. Share, comment, and subscribe to see how their dangerous bond begins to unfold. Life on the plantation was harsher than she ever imagined, and every day brought a new test of survival. The sun rose again over the Virginia fields, but for her, each dawn was heavier than the last. She woke to the sounds of the plantation, the crack of whips, the low hum of laboring slaves, the distant laughter of overseers. Fear wrapped around her like a chain. The slave, her assigned protector and captor, was already moving through the yard, every motion deliberate, every glance commanding. She followed silently, her heart pounding. He did not speak. Words were a luxury neither of them could afford. The other slaves whispered as she passed. Some pitied her, some envied her courage, but no one dared interfere. Her fate had been sealed. Meals were eaten in silence. Nights were spent in the shadows of the quarters, where fear was a constant companion. She tried small acts of defiance, a sharp glance, a whispered refusal, a step away from his command. Each time he allowed it, just enough, not too much. His presence was overwhelming, muscles coiled, hands capable of crushing, eyes that saw everything. Yet there was a restraint that puzzled her, a hint of something beneath the surface, something human. The girl began to notice details, the way he paused before entering the fields, the way his jaw tightened at the overseer's cruelty, the way his eyes softened when he thought she wasn't looking. It was confusing, terrifying, and strangely hopeful. But hope was dangerous. The plantation was no place for it. Every shadow hid a threat. Every glance could bring punishment, and every secret desire could turn deadly. As the days bled into weeks, she began to understand the rules of this new life. Survival meant obeying. Survival meant watching. Survival meant trusting no one. Yet, despite her fear, she could feel a spark between them, a connection neither had asked for, a bond forged in fear, respect, and unspoken tension. And somewhere deep inside, she wondered, could the strongest man on the plantation also be her only ally? Secrets have a way of surfacing, even in the quietest corners of a plantation, and some truths can be deadly. The nights were the hardest. Darkness wrapped around the quarters like a shroud. She could hear whispers through the walls. Shadows moved where no one should be. The wind carried secrets from one end of the plantation to the other. The slave moved like a ghost through the halls, silent and watchful. His presence was both a shield and a warning. She began noticing things others overlooked, a hidden stash of letters, a hurried glance between servants, footsteps that didn't belong. Fear mixed with curiosity. Every secret was a puzzle, and she had no choice but to watch, to listen, to learn. The strongest man she had ever known sometimes paused in the shadows, his eyes scanning, calculating. He protected her, sometimes. Other times he simply observed, letting events unfold. A cruel overseer had taken a particular interest in the plantation's hidden affairs. Rumors of punishment and betrayal floated through the air like smoke. She realized that survival was more than obeying commands. It was understanding the invisible threads that connected everyone, the hidden alliances, the quiet betrayals, the power plays she could not yet grasp. The slave occasionally offered glimpses of guidance, a word here, a warning there, not enough to trust completely, just enough to survive. She began keeping her own secrets, small acts unnoticed, silent observations, a mental map of the dangers around her. But the plantation had eyes everywhere, and secrets, no matter how small, could ignite a storm. One night, she overheard something that froze her blood. A plan, a betrayal, a danger she could not yet confront. She looked at the slave, his back to her, muscles tensed, eyes scanning. Could he protect her from this threat, or was she alone in a world that had already decided her fate? The tension between them grew, fear, respect, and something unspoken, something neither dared name. And she realized the plantation was more dangerous than she had imagined, not because of the labor, not because of the overseers, but because of the secrets buried in every shadow. If you're on the edge of your seat, make sure to share, comment, and subscribe, because what they uncover next will change everything. Defiance has a price, and she was about to pay it. The sun rose over the plantation, but its light brought no comfort. She had begun testing boundaries, small gestures at first, a step out of line, a sharp word, a refusal to bow completely. The slave watched silently. His eyes followed her every move, unblinking, calculating. He allowed her defiance, just enough to teach her limits. She discovered a thrill in rebellion, even in the smallest acts. It made her feel alive in a life that had tried to strip her of everything. The other slaves noticed. Some whispered encouragement, some warned her to stop, but she could not. Something inside demanded resistance. One day she deliberately ignored a command. The overseer's whip cracked through the air, missing her by inches. Her heart raced. The slave stepped forward, his presence a wall between her and danger. The overseer faltered. Fear flickered in his eyes for the first time. She realized the strongest man on the plantation was also the one who could shield her. Or perhaps, she thought, he had his own reasons for letting her survive. Every night tension thickened. Their silence was filled with unspoken understanding. A glance, a breath, a movement, each spoke louder than words. But defiance was dangerous. One mistake could cost her everything. One slip, and the whispers she had overheard could come true. She began to notice subtle changes in him, too. His jaw tightened when she dared to challenge rules. His eyes softened when she acted with courage. A dangerous game had begun. She tested, he measured, and the plantation watched. No one knew how far she could go before the world around her erupted, and no one knew if he would stop her or join her in rebellion. Every small act of defiance brought fear, every act of courage brought hope, and every heartbeat reminded her survival was only possible if she played carefully or boldly. If you're hooked by her defiance, make sure to share, comment, and subscribe, because the next move could ignite a rebellion no one saw coming. Trust is a dangerous game, and some alliances are deadlier than enemies. The plantation breathed with tension. Every shadow seemed to move with hidden purpose. Whispers grew louder. Servants exchanged glances that spoke of secrets, betrayals, and schemes. She had learned to read them all, to anticipate threats before they struck, but even she could not predict everything. One evening, a fellow slave approached her quietly, words hushed, eyes darting. "They're planning something," he whispered, "something that could destroy more than just the overseers." Fear surged through her veins. Her first instinct was to run, but the strongest man on the plantation was near. He noticed her unease. His eyes met hers. A warning, a question, a promise all at once. She nodded subtly. He understood. Betrayals were everywhere. A task left unfinished could be punished. A glance in the wrong direction could ruin lives. Allies were rare. trust even rarer. The slave's presence was both shield and threat. He moved among conspirators with careful precision, disrupting plots silently, leaving no trace. She watched him, fascinated and fearful. He was a man of strength, yes, but also of strategy. Every action was deliberate, every silence purposeful. And yet there were moments when he let his guard down. A soft word, a fleeting glance, hints of loyalty, hints of understanding. The girl realized that alliances could form in the unlikeliest places, but betrayal could also strike where least expected. One night, a plot unfolded in the dark of the fields. Shadows clashed, whispers turned to cries, and in the chaos, she learned that survival demanded more than courage, it demanded cunning. The plantation was a battlefield, and every step she took, every secret she uncovered, brought her closer to danger or salvation. She looked at him, the strongest man she had ever known, and wondered, would he be the one to guide her through the storm or the storm itself? Danger was no longer just a whisper, it had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The sun burned low over the Virginia fields. The air was thick with tension. She could feel it in every glance, every movement around her. The plantation was no longer a place to survive, it was a battlefield. The overseer's cruelty escalated. Punishments came faster, whips cracked closer, eyes watched from every corner. The slave moved like a shadow among them, strong, silent, unstoppable. Yet even he could not stop the storm that was brewing. A confrontation erupted in the yard. Voices shouted, blows were exchanged. Fear surged through her chest, freezing her in place. But the slave was there, always there, deflecting, shielding, controlling the chaos with a power that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. She realized then, this man was more than strength. He was a force, a weapon, and perhaps her only hope. The rebellion she had begun, even in small acts, was no longer quiet. The seeds of defiance were sprouting among the other slaves. Whispers of courage and retaliation spread like wildfire. Yet danger was closer than anyone knew. A single mistake could bring death, not just to her, but to everyone she had come to care for. In the shadows, alliances shifted. Some betrayed, some protected, but no one was entirely safe. The strongest man she had ever known faced his own test. Decisions had to be made in silence, in shadows, where the wrong move meant ruin. Her heart pounded. Fear, respect, and a strange flicker of trust tangled inside her. Could she rely on him? Could she survive the storm that was about to crash down? And in that moment she understood. Courage alone was not enough. Survival demanded cunning, strength, and an unbreakable will. The plantation was alive with tension, and the days ahead would push them both to their limits. If the rising danger keeps you on the edge, make sure to share, comment, and subscribe, because the next events will change the fate of everyone on the plantation. A single choice can change everything, and the time for waiting was over. The night was thick, heavy with tension. The plantation lay in uneasy silence, but danger lurked in every shadow. She had watched, waited, and calculated. Fear had been her constant companion, but courage was beginning to stir. The slave stood near the edge of the fields, muscles tense, eyes scanning. He had protected her countless times, but now the threat was greater than anything they had faced. Whispers of rebellion were spreading faster than anyone could control. Plans were being made in secrecy. Loyalties were tested, and betrayal was closer than it seemed. She took a step forward, heart pounding, defiance sparking in her chest. She would act. Not tomorrow, not later, now. The strongest man on the plantation noticed. A flicker of surprise passed through his eyes, followed by a shadow of admiration. He understood. Together they moved through the dark, silent, careful. Every sound could betray them. Every glance could change their fates. The girl realized that survival required more than fear. It required action. And sometimes, action demanded courage she never knew she possessed. In the shadows, an unexpected ally revealed themselves. A plan was set into motion. One wrong move, and death or punishment awaited. One right move, and the power dynamics of the plantation could shift forever. She looked at him, the strongest man she had ever known. His eyes locked with hers, a silent question, a silent promise. They were partners in this dangerous gamble. The first act of rebellion had begun, the first spark ignited, and the plantation would never be the same. Every heartbeat was a warning, every breath was a risk, but the girl felt alive, more alive than she had ever been in the confines of fear. The turning point had come, the tide was rising, and nothing would stop what had begun. If this bold move keeps you on the edge, make sure to share, comment, and subscribe, because the next Wext will bring a confrontation no one will forget. The storm had arrived, and no one would leave the plantation unchanged. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood-red streaks. Shadows stretched long across the fields. The plantation trembled with tension. Whispers had become shouts. Secrets had ignited into confrontation. She stood beside the strongest man on the plantation, heart pounding, every nerve on fire. The moment of reckoning had come. The overseers had discovered the whispered plans. Anger and fear twisted across their faces. Whips rose, shouts rang through the air. Chaos erupted, slaves scattered. Fear clawed at her chest, but she did not move. She would not run. Not now. He moved like a force of nature. Every strike, every shove, every move precise, protecting her, punishing those who threatened her. But it was more than strength. Strategy, cunning, and resolve flowed through him. The plantation had never seen such a clash. She found courage within herself she did not know existed. She stood tall, met eyes that sought to dominate her, and refused to bow. Allies emerged from the shadows. Betrayers hesitated. The balance of power shifted, trembling on the edge of a knife. In that instant, she realized survival was not about hiding. It was about fighting, about claiming space where none was given. The slave's hand rested briefly on hers, steady, grounding, a silent vow that they were in this together. A final confrontation erupted in the heart of the plantation yard. Voices shouted, feet stamped, and the very earth seemed to tremble. And then, silence. The moment hung like a dagger above them. Hearts raced, eyes darted. The outcome could change everything. She had survived, he had survived, but the plantation would never forget the night its rules were shattered. The storm had passed, but the scars remained, and the plantation would never be the same. The sun rose over Virginia, soft and pale, yet the fields were silent, heavy with the weight of what had occurred. She walked through the yard, every step cautious, every breath measured. The chaos of the night before lingered like smoke. The strongest man on the plantation moved beside her, silent as always, but a quiet strength radiated from him. No words were needed. Their bond had been forged in fear, courage, and rebellion. The overseers who had threatened them lay defeated, not all dead, but humbled. Their control fractured, their authority broken. The other slaves looked on, some in awe, some in cautious relief. Whispers of courage, of defiance, of hope began to ripple through the plantation. She realized that survival had been more than obedience or fear. It had been strategy, courage, and unspoken alliances. It had been trust forged in the shadows. The slave, once untouchable and feared, now stood as a protector, a leader, a symbol. The girl had learned to navigate danger, to seize courage, and to claim her own strength. Together they walked past the remnants of the chaos. The plantation would remember this night, not for the whips, the fear, or the power, but for the defiance that had risen where none expected. And she understood something profound. Life could be given, it could be taken, but it could also be reclaimed. The plantation remained a dangerous place, but now it carried a new balance, one where courage, cunning, and the strength of the unlikely alliance could alter destinies. She looked at him one last time, their eyes locking with understanding. Survival was no longer a question. They had changed the rules of the world they had inherited. And though the scars of fear would linger, so too would the fire of defiance and the memory of a night that reshaped the lives of everyone on the plantation. If this story of survival, courage, and defiance gripped you, make sure to share, comment, and subscribe, because more tales like this are coming, and you won't want to miss a single one.